Speaker, that sounded like a leadership speech to me. And I'll tell you what, I know that Mr. Robinson, Mr. Speaker, has bottled it. Mr. Robinson has bottled it. He hasn't got the bottle to stand up. He hasn't got the bottle to take the reins. He hasn't got the bottle to get out there and try and rebuild what is a languishing and suffering Labour movement at the moment. But you know what? Mr. Little has. He has got the bottle. I believe we came in together. We're both in our first term. I've got a lot of respect for Mr. Little. He's got the bottle to stand up and say, don't worry, I'll take over. I'm going to take the reins. I'm going to fix this. So I'm waiting with bated breath to watch in the next couple of days. He talked about Glocks. He's arming himself. He's getting himself ready. There might be a Mexican standoff happening in that caucus room at the moment, but he's equipped, he's ready, he's got the skills, he's got the bottle, he'll have a go at it. Mr. Speaker, the Victims' Orders Against Violent Offenders Bill is a very important bill. And I just want to discuss some of the things that we talked about and some of the submissions that we heard through the Select Committee process. And of course, I just want to acknowledge our Select Committee Chair, Jackie Dean, who's a very, very good Chair of the Select Committee. We work well together. I want to acknowledge Mr. Goff, another very good member of our Select Committee. We do work well together. We do drive towards consensus, and we had some very good discussion in relation to this bill, and I think we made some very good changes to it. I'd just like to go over a couple of those. So Clause 5 of the bill defines a violent offender as being a person convicted of a violent offence for which they have been sentenced to 5 years or more in prison. Well, the committee decided to make a recommendation that, in actual fact, some offenders that are convicted and sentenced to maybe 2 years in prison, they're still a serious offence, and they could still be a genuine threat to a victim. And so we felt that we would like to lower the threshold and actually get it more in line with the Parole Act of 2002. So the committee made that recommendation. It was a good one, and it's going to be a good change. The committee also made a recommendation around Clause 11B to provide for final non-contact orders to extend to associates of offenders under circumstances. To meet the criteria, the offender would have to have encouraged the associate to behave in forbidden ways as set out in 11A. And the associate would have had to have engaged in that behaviour, so there actually would have had to have been an act. It's not enough just to say that there's a possibility. The associate would have actually had to have performed or done something to have fallen within the Clause 11A. The definition of associate was also inserted through Clause 4. The bill also allows, and this was a very important one, the bill also allows a victim to apply to a district court for a non-contact order at any time after the offender has been released from prison. The committee recommended that this be amended so that applications can be made any time after sentencing. So the significant thing about this change was that what it meant in practice was that a victim had to wait for the offender to actually be released before they could go to a district court and make an application for a non-contact order. What it means now that is on the offender's sentencing, so when they've been sentenced and they're on their way to court, they're on their way to prison, is the victim can actually make an application then. Now, what this also means is that, well, of course it means that the order is then in place for when the offender is actually paroled or comes out of prison. The order is active immediately, it's already in place. But what it actually also means, it gives her cover to make sure that the offender, whilst in custody, can't actually contact her at all. So this was a very, very good change. There's a lot of debate and talk around this, and it was a good, solid recommendation that came out of the committee. The committee also recommended amending Clause 7 to allow an application for a non-contact order to be made without notice if the court is satisfied the delay could lead to undue hardship for the victim. And we actually had a young lady that had the courage to come and appear and make a submission in front of the committee, and her circumstances related directly to this clause. So finally, Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to say that I'm very proud. This is a very good piece of legislation. It does go a long way to ensuring that victims do feel safe, and I want to support and that the Minister's comment in the opening remarks is that this government is very focused on making sure that victims feel safe and victims' rights are adhered to. Just very finally, Mr Speaker, before I finish, I just want to acknowledge that we've seen the problems in Iraq. It's a part of the world. The Middle East is a part of the world I was lucky enough to spend some time in. I have a real love for it. It's a place that's got massive potential, rich history, and I just want to acknowledge the people there. It's often the non-combatants, the people that are caught in the middle of this type of conflict that get hurt the most, and I just wanted to acknowledge them. Thank you very much.
Speaker.
Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr Speaker, the Labor Party supported this bill on its introduction, and of course the Labor Party will always support legislation that is designed